Whistleblower going to give written answers only? I don't think so. Plus, not a single question about Elizabeth Warren's heritage, but a lot of questions from the media about the healthcare disaster that she has rolled out. Also, we're in total political polarization. The polls are showing us that this country is definitely divided, my friends. Trump's removal, highly competitive key states. We've got that data and much more coming up on the Buck Sexton Show. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Buck Sexton Show. Great to have you with me here on this wonderful Monday in NYC. It's starting to get a little chilly. Feels like fall in the air, doesn't it, Producer Mark? I've got to stop wearing just the vest and maybe go for a full jacket
Yeah,
soon.
you're going to need a jacket soon.
You need a jacket soon.
For sure.
Otherwise, I just look like a finance bro. We all walk around with these like LL Bean vests on. We got a big show today to get to. We've got the president who is fighting hard on the impeachment narrative that's being rolled out against him. In fact, why don't we hop right to that? The whistleblower, also known as the deep state Democrat, who is furiously and feverishly trying to avoid anyone really knowing who this person is, because the whole thing will collapse. Just like, remember how the dossier was used as, and the dossier was treated as serious. James Comey briefed President Trump after he won the election on, I just wanted him to know that this was out there. Oh, no, it wasn't supposed to be a sword of Damocles on the new president-elect's administration. It was just meant to be a friendly reminder from shady Sancta Comey. Nice administration you got coming in here. Be ashamed if something happened to it. So they used the dossier for the FISA warrant. They used the dossier to justify all this stuff, as you remember. And initially, when people started to ask questions, where did this dossier come from? Who pulled this thing together? It was a conspiracy theory, they told us, that this was maybe Democrat opposition research. And they fought very hard to make sure nobody would know that. And then we found out. Yes, in fact, the DNC, through a couple of cutouts, did pay for the anti-Trump dossier. But the damage had already largely been done. People had been fed this narrative of anti-Trumpism for so long that they believed it even when the facts came in to refute what they had been told. This is the Twitter phenomenon. The lie about Trump gets 30,000 retweets, right? The damaging thing about him, I heard an anonymous report that President Trump is going to resign tomorrow because he's about to go to prison. 30,000 retweets. And then same journalist, same account, a couple hours later, turns out that was a hoax that I perpetrated, and there's no evidence for that whatsoever. Like 100 retweets. Now, you might say, oh, but Buck, they want to defend their credibility. No, they don't. They're activists. They're propagandists. Their credibility doesn't really matter. All that matters is what they're trying to achieve, and in this case, they're trying to achieve the destruction of President Donald Trump. Which then brings me to the whistleblower. Who wants to place a bet now that we will find out exactly what I said from the first week the whistleblower story broke? I will take a bit of a bow here because I tend to see these things coming. A little bit old CIA nerd analyst skill set coming into play. When we find out eventually, as I believe we will, who the whistleblower is, we will not be surprised at all when we learn that this person is deeply anti-Trump. There's already reporting that while this person was, and we will say he, I suppose, for now, because the name that's out there is a he. While he was at the NSC, there were concerns among other NSC staffers that this person was trying to take down the president. This person was a deep state operative. Why should we think that that's so unbelievable? Well, we shouldn't think that at all. It's entirely believable. In fact, let's remember, my friends, that just to get at General Flynn, somebody in the United States government, and almost certainly a very senior person, somebody in the United States government thought that it was appropriate, and in fact even necessary, to leak the contents of a phone call that would have been highly, highly classified, and in doing so, present themselves with the possibility of serious prison time. Somebody would place themselves in legal jeopardy. Someone did this. This happened just to stick a thumb in the eye of General Michael Flynn and the Trump administration. So don't tell me, no one can convince me that there aren't people who are currently working for the federal government who would not be willing to lie, to break rules, to act in ways that are violations of the oaths they pretend they're upholding by attacking Trump, nobody will convince me that that's beyond belief. Of course, it's entirely believable, and that's why this whistleblower is trying so very hard to make sure we don't find out who it is. Because just as with the dossier, the credibility crumbled the moment we knew who had paid for it. The moment we figure out who this whistleblower really is, oh, and the second whistleblower too, what happened to that person? I know the lawyer who is representing both of these individuals. He is a deeply anti-Trump, nice enough fellow, deeply anti-Trump, hates the president, despises the president of the United States. So none of this is surprising to me. But I would note that in the early days of this whole effort to take down the president, we were told that it was necessary for the whistleblower to testify, that the whistleblower would in fact have to share so much with the American people that they would have to know. And then when it came out that there was early stage coordination with Adam Schiff, the shiftiest of characters in the Democrat Congress, now we're told, oh no, only written answers. That's the latest. Only written answers to be shared. Why wouldn't this person be willing to take questions from Republicans? Because it would be too obvious. Why can't they allow the same process that would be essential, as I've talked to you about, in any understanding of our judicial system, and goes all the way back to English common law? Why can't this person be submitted to some form of, even if behind closed doors, cross-examination? Our Democrats desperate to avoid that because the whole thing will collapse. Now, I believe they know the whole thing will eventually collapse regardless of whether the person testifies or not. They're just trying to, as we saw with the dossier and Russia collusion madness, extend the lifespan of this damaging narrative as long as they can, because it molds perception along the way. It convinces people. One, it feeds the left wing, the rabid, insane left wing base, the anti-Trumpism that they need, but also people will think, wow, there must be something to this. We're hearing about impeachment every day, day after day. Perhaps President Trump did do something wrong. You'll also note that I've told you from the beginning, I wasn't into the quid pro quo or not defense. I was into I don't understand what the problem is here defense. There's a legitimate basis to investigate the Bidens. That looks bad for the Democrats is just too darn bad. Sorry. The same people that pushed a farcical investigation of Donald Trump, saying that he worked with the Russians to cheat in an election, those same people pretend that wasn't entirely political, but the investigation of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden that didn't even happen, by the way, would be. This is unserious stuff from the left, but unfortunately, unserious stuff defines the left these days. Serious risks, serious damages to rule of law and to fairness and decency, but intellectually speaking, entirely unserious. That should be the left's bumper sticker. We are entirely unserious. Now you have 4 White House witnesses who have said that they are not going to show up at the House committee. They're going to defy subpoenas in this impeachment probe. And everyone's going to say, on the left, of course, the Democrats, oh, this is terrible. How could they? Disrespecting the United States Congress. Well, the executive branch has prerogatives. The Congress has prerogatives. The executive branch has powers. Congress has. You see what I'm saying? Separate but equal branches of government. And so what happens now? Well, the tie goes to the judges. And that's what's going to happen. They're taking this into the courts. And the Trump administration should take a page from the book of the Democrats. See, if the Trump administration was going to play by the Romney, McCain rules of back in the day, they would just say, okay, whatever you want, we'll just comply. We'll just do it because the sanctity of our democracy is at stake or whatever. No, instead they're going to say, take us to court. Let's see what the judges say. Take us to court. Let's see what the judges say. Fight it at every step of the way. The process is there to defend them. Use the process as a defense. Otherwise, the process only gets used against Republicans and against Trump as offense. This is the world that we live in now. This is the country that we are dealing with, and the Democrat Party that has completely lost its mind. In fact, President Trump even went so far as to say that. Producer Mark, would you please play clip 9 for me. I think the president was in rare form recently.
The Democrats are crazed. They're lunatics. In the meantime, we have the greatest economy ever. We have a man on the other side, Adam Schiff, who's a corrupt politician, as you know. He's a corrupt politician. He made up a speech, and he read what I said, and it wasn't what I said. It was a terrible thing he said, and many people saw that.
The Democrats are crazy, Trump says. I can't pretend that I disagree with him. There is a mania at the heart of all of this anti-Trumpism. There is a disconnect from reality, an inability to be objective, an unwillingness to be fair. And it's unlike anything I've ever seen before in politics. I'd be willing to bet it's unlike anything you've ever seen before in politics, because I don't think this has ever happened before. Not in this way. Certainly not in our modern media environment. And the people who think that we're going to go back to normal after this aren't paying attention. So the only way through it is to win. And that then brings me to the polls. Oh, we hear so much about polls these days and what they mean for the president. We are a year out for the election. Let's dive into some of the numbers and what it means, not just for who might win the next election, but also how does that affect perceptions of the impeachment process that is currently underway.
I have the real polls. The CNN polls are fake. The Fox polls have always been lousy. I tell them they ought to get themselves a new pollster. But the real polls, if you look at the polls that came out this morning, people don't want anything to do with impeachment. It's a phony scam. It's a hoax.
Notice how there are certain polls that keep getting done, and there are other polls that never get done. For example, I would like to know if we're ever going to see a poll on whether or not the American people think Adam Schiff is a liar. Can we see a poll on whether the Democrats have basically gone insane? Now, you might say, well, Buck, that would only be probably 50% right. We are in a very polarized political climate. We are in total political polarization. There's very little middle ground on any issue right now. The establishment, the media, the Democrats, they're all trying to make sure that we are as at each other's throats as we can possibly be over every political issue, and that's not about to change anytime soon. But here's the problem that Democrats are going to have to get by, or that Democrats are going to have to be dealing with. You have, 49%, according to NBC Wall Street Journal, support impeaching and removing Trump from office. 46% oppose it. That's basically the 2016 election results. It's right in that same realm. So nothing has really changed. We are gearing up right now, to anyone who's paying attention, who's being honest, we are gearing up right now for a replay within the electorate of 2016. That's what we were heading for. Now, there's a very obvious conclusion that should come from all of that. Well, if that's what we're heading for, aren't we heading for the same result? And to that, I would say, looks like it. And this is why when you start to dig into the numbers more deeply, specifically the numbers on, forget about nationwide, this very broad swath of polling that they'll do about likely voters across the nation. When you break it down by battleground state, and this was just a poll that came out, there were numbers that came out over the weekend. On the one hand, you have people who are saying that Biden leads Trump by double digits. You will hear that. All right. By 12 points, and this is according to a Fox News poll. But when you look at the state-by-state polling and candidate by candidate, what you find is that Biden in the key states that will determine the next election, right? Ohio, Nevada, Wisconsin, North Carolina. Biden is up by a point or two against Trump in some of those places. When you switch to Bernie Sanders, all of a sudden Trump is up by a few points. And when you switch to Elizabeth Warren, guess what? Trump is up by a bunch in the states that matter. No one really cares how many more votes Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders would win California by than Trump. What matters is the Electoral College and the way that our system, despite what Democrats try to do to change it on the fly, what our system rewards when it comes to politicians and how they campaign and the way that our system is built. So here's where we're heading for a replay of 2016 in which Democrats are pretty much within the margin of error, but you have to also think that last time around they were within the margin of error in the polls and Trump won. This time around, you have had all of these efforts by the media, impeachment, Russia collusion. They've already been running an anti-Trump campaign with everything they've had for the last 3 years, really nonstop. I mean, the effort to impeach Trump has been going on since he first got into office. The effort to undermine his presidency has been going on since he first got into office. There's nothing different here. Nothing changed. What happens, though, when all of a sudden Trump gets to focus a bit more, not just on the campaign trail, where we know he excels in a way that really no other politician, certainly on the right in his generation, has been able to? What happens when you have a Democrat, not a general change idea of a Democrat? Oh, well, this person would be different, a return to normalcy, less angry tweets. So, yeah, like, what if it's, oh, no, you're really going to vote for a President Biden or Warren or Buttigieg or Sanders? I was going to say President Bernie, but close enough. Then people might say, well, hold on a second. I think the Dow Jones hit an all-time high today? Is that right, producer Mark? Stock market's still booming. Unemployment's still super low. No big unnecessary wars. A lot less regulation. Much easier to start a business than it was before. Much easier to pay your bills than it was before Trump got into office. What exactly is Trump was right. There was a massive scam being run at our southern border, and the administration has done a lot, not enough, but a lot to try and tackle that. Trump was right that China has been ripping us off and stealing our intellectual property and getting a free ride, and so standing up to China has cost the Chinese economy a lot more than it has cost our economy, and our economy is still very strong. So what's really the pitch to get rid of Trump when you have another candidate, another person who has to stand across from him on a stage? Medicare for all? Well, that's an idiotic disaster waiting to happen. We'll talk about Elizabeth Warren's massive fumble there, but this all actually ties into impeachment as well, and how there's an aspect of this that is unknowable, but when you're heading for another disaster in the eyes of the left with a Trump victory, that's when you start getting desperate and just throwing things at the wall.
The whistleblower gave a false report. And because of that false report, people thought bad things were done. And then you had Schiff go out and speak before Congress and before the American people and give a false story. He made up a story. And then I released, after all this was done, I released, and everybody said he didn't do anything wrong. But the whistleblower should be revealed, because the whistleblower gave false stories. Some people would call it a fraud. I won't go that far, but when I read it closely, I probably would.
So back to the whistleblower for a moment here. Why is it that the situation right now is that the Democrats are pushing forward with this, even though it's such an, on its face, a weak case? Remember, put aside for a moment the argument, the argument over judgment and over the quid pro quo here, that whether it existed or did not exist. Put that aside and just think about it in the following way. Nothing happened. Ukraine got its aid and no investigation was started. So you're going to try to impeach a president for an interpretation of a phone call that did not result in the actions that allegedly the phone call was meant to get to happen. How much weaker is it going to get than that? This is not a compelling case. You will notice, and there are many conservatives who were a little shook, a little nervous when this first happened. A lot of people on the right for a second said, uh-oh, it's a bad phone call. It might have been politically unwise to say those things on that phone call, but that's a far cry from, uh-oh, the administration is over. And there were a lot of people that were making that case that the administration should effectively, or could effectively, come to an end because of the Trump-Zelensky conversation. But I want to point to my friend Andy McCarthy's piece on National Review right now, where he says that we don't know what new revelations might emerge or whether they would unnerve the president's support within the GOP. The title of the article is Impeachment is Unpredictable. Now this starts to make a bit more sense. When we look at where the situation is right now with the polls, with the economy, anyone who is being honest, even on the left, must know. I mean, these polls you see about Biden with a double-digit lead, no serious person really believes that that's the way that this election is going to go if it were held tomorrow. In fact, the smartest, the savviest political observers that I know on the left and the right have been agree with me, which is probably why I think they're so savvy, if we're going to be honest about this, but that Biden's not even going to make it past, March or April in the race. That Biden he's going to lose his front runner status, and that's going to be it for the Biden campaign. I think that's where this is all headed. Who takes over then? The problem is you don't have a second or a third candidate really who can become the establishment person easily, especially with Elizabeth Warren's, wow, let's talk about our health care, with her debacle, which we will get to. But so in that context, all of what's going on right now around impeachment, the whistleblower, these witnesses being called, not testifying, the fights in the courts, Adam Schiff's shady behind closed doors shenanigans. Schiff's shady shenanigans. There we go. All of that starts to make more sense because they need an X factor. The Democrats, the left, they need something to shake up what the momentum is looking like right now. They need to throw a wrench into the gears. They need to do something that will offset the advantage that Trump is going to have when you have a Democrat candidate emerging from this primary, or at least it becomes clear who the likely Democrat candidate will be, and that person has to fight against Donald Trump. And that's why this impeachment proceeding, they're really so concerned with process and timing, because it's all about getting those two things, or controlling the first and getting the second one correct. They could turn this impeachment, they could offer up, and this is, Andy goes into this, we're focused on Ukraine, but that's really just the pretext to get this whole thing going. I don't believe, the Democrats really believe that Ukraine alone, for example, would be enough to remove the president. That's, to me, an unserious position, an unserious argument. I don't believe that's where this is. So then we go to the next level of this. Okay, well, if that's the case, what are they trying to accomplish? What are Schiff and Pelosi and, and the whole rest of them, Schumer, all the leaders of the Democrat left, what are they hoping to get out of this impeachment proceeding? I know it's run by the House, but obviously these other Democrat voices matter in this process. And when the Senate trial happens, Chuck Schumer will certainly have a voice that people are listening to in this, much to my irritation, as well as many other people's. But the answer is, it'll just be the anti-Trump show. We don't know what's going to come out. We don't know what articles of impeachment they will present. And more to the point, who knows what they may find in this process. I just saw today that I think an appeals court denied the Trump administration's position that New York City can't subpoena his tax records. That's what they're going to do. By the way, the same people who always tell you that Trump is destroying the rule of law and Trump is a dictator and a fascist. Notice how whenever the administration, whenever this White House disagrees with a position, their immediate response is, okay, well, let's go to court. Their immediate response is, we'll see you in court. That's not what dictators do. That's not what fascists do, especially not with an independent judiciary that, if anything, leans anti-Trump, if we're going to say that there's some bias there. If we're going to be fair-minded about this, overwhelmingly it's the case that the judiciary is not in line with the Trump administration, or at least so far on a lot of key issues at the lower level. All you need is one member of the judiciary who happens to be in the Ninth Circuit, or whatever circuit, but in the more liberal parts of the country, to invoke a universal injunction and stop the administration from doing what it should be able to do. But they're going to try every trick in the book. They're going to try and unearth new information. They're going to try to present things to their allies in the press to take Trump down, because you have to also remember that this is a matter of sanity for the left now. They're worried that they may have a collective nervous breakdown if Trump wins re-election. I really believe that. But beyond that, this is an opportunity to replay 2016. This is an opportunity for the Democrats, especially the Democrats in the media, the so-called journalist class, to set right what was wrong in 2016 when they either were a little too complacent or just a little too ineffective in destroying Trump. I think it was a combination of both. They figured that things were just going to head to a Hillary win, and so remember, NBC and the Access Hollywood tape. This was a despicable last-minute tactic of the media. They didn't want the people to be able to think about this for very long. This was the classic October surprise, media colluding with the Democratic Party to take down a candidate they did not like, and it did not work. They want another October surprise. This is a fishing expedition right now for that, whether it's from Trump's taxes or Stormy Daniels. They'll try to find something. And as much as it is frustrating, annoying, a deep distraction from what really matters in this country and what the government should be working on, if we're going to be honest about it, I understand why Democrats are doing this now. Because there's a quiet panic within the Democratic Party. They've got weak candidates running against this president. The president objectively has a record to point to now that any normal person would look at and say, yeah, can we have more of that? That seems like a good idea for the country. The tweets are not what people should be evaluating as the main reason to vote for or against President Trump. It's things like the economy, unemployment, the stock market, GDP growth. All the different metrics and factors that you can look at. And also, how about not starting a really unnecessary war? Not intervening in a country militarily in a way where we're stuck trying to prop some faulty regime up and trying to train police and soldiers in foreign countries who, in many cases, turn their backs on us. Just enough is enough of all that. We've managed to get away from that now. In fact, one of my concerns is that too many good Americans are going to be complacent because things are going so well. They figure everything's just going to be okay. We must have learned our lesson from the 8 years of the Obama administration where the country was not doing as well as it should have done. So everything will be fine. Don't show up and vote in the next election. Trump will win. It's going to be close. It doesn't matter what candidate the Democrats put forward. It's going to be close. This is an election that's going to be fought largely over the razor's edge. It's going to be very tight in all these different places. Now, Trump in the Electoral College, I think, might absolutely wallop. Just might crush whoever his opponent is. But in the popular vote and in the overall vote count and vote tally state by state, it's going to be a tight one. And that's why Andy McCarthy's point here in National Review about impeachment is uncertain. What do Democrats have to lose from doing this? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But they've taken the position that whatever structural damage they do to our system of government, whatever happens as a result of this down the line to other presidencies, and the way that this tears at the fabric of the country, separates us, embitters us against each other, divides us as a people, all of that is, Democrats don't really care. As long as they have a shot to do something that stops the Trump train from cruising to victory in 2020, which they have to be. They are unscrupulous. The left is unscrupulous but savvy. They have to be concerned about that, looking at the way everything is going right now. And so, sure, are they taking some long bombs in the end zone to see what can happen here with impeachment? Are they just, doing what they can to create the possible scenario of something catastrophic that emerges for Trump, where GOP support? See, if it's just entirely partisan, then this is all a waste. When you have defections among GOP in that GOP members of the House, and then perhaps even some GOP senators, when they say, I can no longer support this president, even if it does not result in removal from office, which I think that would have to be a truly unforeseeable and catastrophic situation, even if that's the case, then there'll be damage done to the president of the United States going into re-election, right? So if he doesn't get removed, but there are some Republican defections, that looks bad. They're trying to at least get there. That, I think, is the goal. Get a few Republicans to peel off. Just tell enough sordid tales about Stormy Daniels or about tax returns or something so that Republicans who are in some tough re-election fights say, I can't. They try to do that soundbite that will make the New York Times ease up on them a little bit, not realizing that the New York Times is just going to destroy them a week later. Republicans never learn this lesson, by the way. They always think that if they can get mainstream papers to view them as reasonable, as sound thinkers, they'll continue to be fair to them. That's never the case. They just use them and discard them. This is so true of never-Trumpers as well. They're used by the mainstream media and abused and then discarded the moment they're no longer useful. It's a lesson that I wish some never-Trumpers out there that I know from media world would learn, but I suppose it's just too seductive to go from being quasi-anonymous after having been in this business to all of a sudden being given a big platform because you hate Trump so much. There's a lot of that going on, unfortunately.
You know what terrifies me? Impeachment, conviction, re-election as a private citizen. Now I'm going to...
That qualifies for analysis over at MSNBC. That's what keeps them up late at night. Impeachment, conviction, removal, and then winning again. I know she's kind of kidding, but it's hard to assess what the left thinks is a joke and what they don't because so much of what they say is an unfunny or unintentional joke about this president. They've completely lost their minds. In fact, President Trump is even saying that the most powerful Democrat right now in elected office, Nancy Pelosi, which tells you a lot about who the Democrats are, that she is, in fact, a little bit wacko. Producer Mark, would you please play the president explaining his thoughts on the Speaker of the House, clip 10?
I think Nancy Pelosi has lost her mind, and I think, frankly, that she should go back home to San Francisco because her district has become a mess. Number one in the country for going down. All she thinks about is impeachment, but she doesn't want to impeach. You know who wants to impeach? The people that run the party, the radical left.
You know what the sad truth is for places like San Francisco, it's true here in New York City as well. Members of Congress are really meant to be the progressive avatars of the voters in these districts at the federal level. They're meant to attacking Trump if you're a representative, I mean, never mind Speaker of the House, but if you're just a representative from a very, very blue district, then you're doing your job. It's much less about what can be done through congressional legislation for the people of that area. Attacking Trump is good for business, unfortunately. Attacking Trump is the single most important thing to a lot of voters in places like New York City and San Francisco. Because if you've got to think, if politicians were being judged by results, Nancy Pelosi would no longer have elected office. California would no longer be a Democratic mono party or monoculture. It's just top to bottom Democrats running that state now. Mayor Bill de Blasio would not even make it through office without, I don't know if we could remove them here through a recall or something. I'd have to look into that in New York, but they'd figure something out. They'd push him out of office somehow using the process. But instead, what has become very apparent to me is all you have to do if you represent Democrats and you only care about Democrats. There's no effort at bipartisanship. There's nothing about passing legislation that will just help people in your district. You're only caring about the Democrats and the base that comes out and votes for you. Is that anti-Trump psychosis sells? Whether you're Pelosi, whether you're Schumer, whether you're de Blasio, although I have not met, and this is pretty amazing. I have not met a Democrat or a Republican, and I'm here in New York City. We're doing the show in New York City. I live here, spent most of my life here, I should say. I have not met a single person who thinks Bill de Blasio is good at his job. I've not met one. Not one. Not a Democrat, not a Republican. I've asked a lot of them, too. It's not results-based, that's for sure. The city is definitely going downhill right now. But as I'm saying, it's really just about the anti-Trump branding of these various politicians. So the fact that Nancy Pelosi to any normal person would think, what legislation is she suggesting? What should be? No, instead it's just anti-Trump is everything now for the Democratic Party. That's all there is. Until they have power, they don't want to have a discussion about governing or legislating. They want power back in their hands, and then it's worth having a conversation about what could be done, and not could be done for, but really what will be mandated to be done to the American people. That's how Democrats do it. They don't do things for you. Democrats in elected office do things to you.